Hi, it's DeAnna, and I just wanted to share with you a few tips for like troubleshooting communication between you and your dog. And these tips, I have learned them and I use them with Kendalee, my guide dog, but they work for any dog, and I think you might find them helpful. Now, first of all, I do want to have a disclaimer. I am not a professional trainer. I've never pretended to be, and I'm not claiming to be now, but I have kind of an unusual background. Before I lost so much of my vision, I was a practicing veterinarian for about 16 years, and I was blessed to be a puppy raiser for Guiding Eyes for the Blind, and now I work a guide dog. She's my teammate, Kendalee, and we've been together for about 7 years now. So these tips that I would like to share as far as improving my communication with her, I think you might find helpful when working with any dog in your life. So the first thing I do, if I'm working with Kendalee and I give her a command and she doesn't respond correctly or doesn't respond at all, the first thing I think about, especially if it's a new skill, is does she really have the skill down? Does she really understand what I'm asking her to do? Or perhaps is she still in the learning phase where she's not exactly sure of the request I'm making? And I find that sometimes this is really common in the early parts of learning, because I'm going to use sit for an example. But what if one day I ask Kendalee to sit and she does it, and I ask her to sit again same day and she does it several times successfully, but the very next morning I get up and we try it again. Kendalee, sit, and she doesn't do it. That's happened to me before in several different new skills. And she's not trying to be a bad dog or disobedient. What that tells me, the information I glean from this experience, is she's still learning. She's still learning the skill and she doesn't have it down well. This happened to us recently. Now she's 9 years old and we also compete in a AKC rally obedience, and we're pretty far up. She's in the master's level at this, and we were learning a new skill called a left spin. So she spins at my side, and we had done this successfully probably 2-3 days. She knew the hand signal, she knew the word signal for it, the word command for it. But then we moved locations and we went to class, and all of a sudden I asked her for the same command, spin, and it wasn't very pretty. So instead of getting mad at her, what information that gave to me is that she doesn't have that down solidly yet. She doesn't have that skill down completely solidly. So she could do it at home in the same environment, but when I moved her, that changed, and we're still working on it. And that's okay. And when they're in the learning phase, or when she's in the learning phase, I try very hard not to correct her or in any way discipline her, because learning should be fun. Like, I want her to love to learn with me. And so if I correct her in this learning phase where she's not absolutely sure of the skill, I think that breeds stress in her. And I don't want her to be afraid of not getting something exactly right while we're working on a new skill. So the first thing, like I said, if I'm having trouble with a skill, does she really know the skill? So, if you're working with your dog, think about that. Do they really solidly have that skill down? The second thing I want to think about when I request a skill or give her a command and it doesn't go well is am I communicating that request to her in a clear and concise manner? And let me give you an example of this. Have you ever asked your dog to sit down? Because I have. So Kendalee knows the command sit and she knows down, but now just kind of suddenly thrown in this like random word, sit down. And can you imagine, to a dog's ears, that can be very confusing. So, Mom, what are you wanting? Do you want me to sit? Do you want me to down? She could try to do both, I suppose. And as a guide dog, and I've done this on more of one occasion too, I will give her maybe a verbal command to take a right, but my hand signal says left. So there again, it's my error, not her error. I have communicated my request to her in a manner that's very confusing to her. So a lot of times, if I think about these two things, I can iron out a lot of issues. Does she know the skill? Has she got it down solidly? And am I communicating my request to her in a manner that she can clearly understand? Now, the third thing is probably where our communication with our dogs gets off kilter a little bit more, especially if we've worked at our dogs and we've checked off the first two boxes. And this can be, say the dog knows the skill, you're communicating it clearly, but you're asking for a command and the dog is still not responding. So then what I try to evaluate is Kendalee in an area, is she in a headspace where she can actually hear my request? And I'm not talking about her having problems with her ears, but I'm talking about, can she actually listen to what I'm asking her to do? So in the human world, let me give you this example. So say your significant other is looking at something on their phone, or maybe they're very engrossed in a ball game, and you speak to them and ask them a question, and they hear you, but they can't really be listening to you. So there's a difference. So with Kendalee, if I give her a request, but she's not in the headspace, she's not somewhere in her mind that she can actually take my request in, then there's the problem in communication. So I will always remember when we were raising puppies, this was a tip given to me, and I've tried to keep it in mind when working with Kendalee. And the tip was, never issue a command or request to your dog more than 2 times the same way. If you ask your dog for a command or behavior twice and they don't respond appropriately, then it's up to me, not Kendalee, it's up to me to change something. So let me give you an example of this. So Kendalee's usually her nose. She's a Labrador, and scent really gets her in a mind space where sometimes she can't hear mom very well. So say I have her out on a loose leash and she's getting busy, which means she's going potty, and I know she's finished, but she's still way out at the end of her leash. And I say, Kendalee, come. That's number 1. Second time, I may say it a little firmer. I don't yell. I don't really think yelling does any good when I'm communicating with her. And I don't want to get in the habit of having to raise my voice to get her to respond. So I don't want to create that habit. So I'll ask her a second time. Now, maybe a little more firm. Kendalee, come. If nothing happens, then the next response is on me, not on her. I need to either change the way I'm making my request or change something in my behavior. So in this situation, what I usually do, instead of asking a third time verbally, I've asked twice, that's it. I will follow, because of my low vision, I will follow the leash back to Kendalee and put my hand gently but firmly on her collar and then move her back to me to the spot where I was asking her to return to. Now, usually as soon as my hand goes on her collar, I can feel her whole body posture change. Suddenly, that's usually enough. She's like, oh, mom's talking to me. She's had to come out and touch my collar. I don't have to yell at her. I don't have to jerk on her, collar to get her to do that. Usually she's a gentle soul. Usually that's enough to redirect her. Another example in guide work, I remember early on, she still had a little issue with dog distractions. And we had exited a store, and to our right, there was a little dog, just a pet dog, barking at her. And of course, that startled me as well. So I was like, Kendalee, left. Asked again, Kendalee, left. No response. I mean, she was under a lot of stress. That dog is right in her face, so she couldn't hear me. I was issuing that command. I could have asked her 4 more times. She wasn't going to go left. she could not hear what I needed her to hear. So there again, the responsibility is now back on me. I need to do something differently. So in that situation, what I remember doing is, first of all, I let go of her harness handle. There's no effective guiding going on in that position. Anyway, so I let go of the harness handle. And if you're a guide dog team, you know, as soon as you drop the harness handle, that alerts the dog something's changed. With her at that moment, I think the distraction was so overwhelming with the dog right up in her face. I actually had to give a little quick tug on her leash and release. That again redirected her focus to me, and then I asked her to do something she was really well versed in. Usually asked her to do a sit. She had that down solidly, and then I think I even treated her, and that was to refocus her back on me. So like I said, sometimes we just find that our dogs are just in a spot where, and I just really believe our dogs really want to do what we're asking of them. But sometimes they're just in a headspace where they can't hear what we're requesting. So then as their partner, whether you're a guide dog handler and a part of the guide team, or you're just a pet owner that's really wanting to communicate with your dog better, that's our responsibility to get the dog's attention again. And let's try to do it in a fair manner and just redirect their focus back to us. So I hope some of these tips you might find helpful. If you're issuing a command, dog is not responding, let's just recap. Make sure they know what you're asking. Make sure they really understand the skill. Number 2, make sure you're issuing the skill, matching your verbal skill or your hand signal. Make sure that is clear and concise in a manner they understand. And thirdly, if you could check off 1 and 2, they know the skill, you're communicating clearly, are they in a headspace where they can listen to you? So I hope these tips may help you along your way with your dog communication. I just find it so exciting to learn together with our dogs, and this should be fun for both us and the dog. And if you like this kind of content, I would love it if you would give me a like below and leave a comment. I love hearing stories about how you work with your dog. And if you'd like to hear more content about Kendalee and I and how we communicate and our guide dog life together, think about following the channel. I'd appreciate that.